Welcome to Horticulture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. What up, True Leaves? We're here.
Hello.
We're
The True
caffeinated.
Leaves are enjoying longer days here in the
They're
KY.
windy right now, but
It
they
very
are at
much
least
so.
longer. So.
But it is sunny.
Spring does not disappoint. It's 80 degrees one day and maybe in the 20s and 30s the
Plants
next.
photosynthesize even when it's windy. That's what I tell myself as I almost blow away outside.
Yeah,
But
it has been very windy.
how's everybody feeling?
Good.
Pretty good.
Better, longer days,
All
sunnier
right.
days.
You
Pretty
know,
good.
this
Pretty
time
good.
of year, the leaves are emerging, and it's sort of a transitional period where if you're interested in identifying plants, identifying trees, it's kind of a fun
It is.
little window of time of like, oh, that's what the buds on this thing look like. That's what the flowers on this thing look like.
I was not happy in the orchard the other day. I was making a site visit to an orchard looking at peach trees, and I believe the variety was Contender, which is typically for Kentucky a more winter hardy variety. And I bet you only one bud in 20 was viable. And I was like, oh no, I don't know if that's going to be, I'm going to have to dig more into that, but yeah.
Could have been a Contender.
I kind of like seeing like the maples flowering, right? Because I think people don't think about like those type of trees flowering, but they totally are. Like their flowers are opening right now.
They're so cute.
They're bright red. Like, so they're like, if you want to like recognize them, like they really stand out, you know?
Yeah.
Yes. They're like little, lispy little...
Yeah.
Very delicate kind of things. Yeah.
Well, I thought it would be a good opportunity to remind people of a little acronym as far as identifying trees. And last episode, we were talking with old Dr. Rick Besson, and you all mentioned the box elder bug, which made me think of box elder, which is actually in the genus Acer, which is maples.
Maple.
And so the letter acronym thing for it is MAD or MADE if you want to include the elder, box elder. And maples, ash, and dogwood, those are the trees that have opposite leaf patterns as opposed to alternating leaf patterns. And so as you look and see these things, if it looks almost like a trident where there's a leaf coming out on one side, a leaf coming out on the other side, and a central shoot coming out, it probably is a maple, an ash, or a dogwood. And so some people will call it mad dog, so that way that you remember what the D stands for. But that was just something. And then the box elder is the other one because it's a maple, so it has the same, or it's in that genus, so it has the same alternating leaf pattern, or opposite leaf pattern, as opposed to alternate leaf pattern, which is that it's sort of like one on the right side, and then a little further down the chute, there's one on the left side, and then a little further down the chute, there's one on the right side. So as you're enjoying the spring flowers and buds and leaves and everything pushing, and you're maybe interested in learning a little more about trees, that was something I wanted to share. I didn't get to share it last episode. Rick had a lot of great stories, but
I've heard that one as like mad buck or mad horse. Jessica, did you learn it as mad buck or mad horse?
I had totally forgotten about that until Brett started talking, and it just like suddenly came.
I was like, "There's one more," and so the buck is Buckeye, but you could also use horse if that makes more sense. Mad horse because it's horse chestnut. So is like the other common name.
Horse chestnut and Buckeye are the same thing.
Yeah.
Yep. So.
Well, you don't see there is a really cool Buckeye up here in our neighborhood, but you don't see them around as much.
No,
you don't, do
much
you?
in Lexington? No,
because they get a lot of sun scald issues, so they're not something you usually see
they mostly
that
grow
often.
In the dark.
Huh?
So they mostly grow in the dark.
Yeah,
they're with
basically
friends.
Vampires.
Go with the friends. And
yeah, they grow with friends. Yeah,
Buckeye, horse chestnut, vampire tree.
Vampire.
Yes.
Another common name.
Beads dinosaur collect.
Yeah, that's a really pretty one up here, and it's got pretty big old leaves, and yeah. But I guess we're on this southern edge, maybe, of some of the.
There's what's the name? It's the red Buckeye that has like the pink floral, like floral display, and it is, and hummingbirds love it. Oh my! It'll stop you in your tracks. It's so beautiful.
A long time ago, in the early
1900s.
2000s, mid 2000s.
The early aughts.
when I worked at the UK research farm, and they had a lot more of the ornamental plantings out there at the horticulture research farm, they had a big planting of those at the back of the farm. And they were
Very
massive
nice.
and beautiful when they were flowering. I don't
can't
think
believe I
they're there
missed that.
anymore.
No, they're
So,
not.
they were near where they did all the hydrangea trials at. That was also impressive to see.
Sad day.
Well, so mad is one way that people might feel when forced to interact with other people. Happy's another way
segue
that people might feel. You know, sometimes if you have to interact with people, or you have to deal with spreadsheets, or you have to deal with other things, maybe that makes you feel horse chestnutty. But today we wanted to talk about all those different feelings and personality types and angles on that, to instead of talking about the gardening type like we talked about a few weeks ago, know yourself and then know your gardening type. This time around, we thought we'd do the markets and just thinking about who we are as people. And we may play some characters. You know, it could be that it's not, you know, that we're all misanthropic and don't ever want to interact with people. But
I want to be
for this
horse.
podcast, we will pretend that we do, and just talk about some of the different market types that we feel like we, you know, could work with based on our personalities.
Yeah.
How's that sound?
I like it.
Sounds good.
Who wants to be the public lover of interacting with people and
me up for the
telling them about
that stays on the farm?
The professional extrovert.
Jessica.
I guess that's me. I guess that's me from our farmers market thing, because like the like the technology side of it, like doing that, like not like reminding myself to post on Facebook and doing all that is such a chore, right?
Yeah.
Versus when I would sell at markets, you know, once you get there and you're after that first year and you get established, you know, you meet people, you make friends, you have your like loyal customers. There's people you look forward to seeing every week. There's maybe people you don't look forward to seeing every week, but there's like, you know, and to have that interaction. And I would definitely say like both my husband and myself, like the more challenging part for us is like if doing like a wholesale or doing like just advertising online versus actually talking with people, explaining like why we grow certain things, or like our cattle, they eat, you know, grain and grass and hay, and why do they eat that, or like how we raise them, and telling our story kind of like face to face with people. Now there's a times we both like reach our limits.
Sure.
And, you know, you need a break.
That's
from
normal.
it.
Yeah.
It's normal. But I know I've mentioned this one before on here at one point, but like there's a customer, I have no idea what his name is, but he has a corgi and his name is Dougal. And I look forward to seeing Dougal and his owner at the market, you know, and I know what kind of like tomatoes he's going to be looking for, you know, those kind of things. So definitely I am more of that.
The relationship builder.
What kind of tomatoes does Dougal like?
Oh, Dougal usually just goes under the table to get out of the sun.
Oh, I see.
Right? But Dougal's owner,
Dougal's more of the B portion of the BLT, probably.
Yes, yeah. So he's
hoping. So I'm gonna not put words in your mouth here.
Okay.
You don't, on a scale of you don't mind to you enjoy that customer service, interpersonal, in-person interaction, where would you put yourself?
I would say I enjoy it, right? Like that was one of the things, like when doing the market, when trying to decide, hey, do we want to grow and drop off produce at like a stand, like an already established stand? Do we want to grow and try to do like the auctions, because we're not that far away from where a well-established auction is? Or you know, building those relationships. And we learned really quickly that even though markets are tiring, it's a big commitment. It's a lot. And by the end of the season, you're ready to be done because you're just tired. It's nice building those relationships. And, you know, with building our media following, it's nice now to see some of those people that we see in person also follow us on there. But yeah, I would say enjoy it and building those relationships. And my husband has different relationships with different people too. Right. And their personalities and they get to know our personalities, or
Mhm.
want to be involved, not in a creepy way with our family, but, like wanting,
How are the
you know,
boys?
how are
Yeah,
the boys?
that.
How are updates? How's your farm? And
Mhm.
people who, like, we only see from, like, May till October
Mhm.
and don't see them the rest of the year, right? And they, look forward and come and ask for updates, and, there's ones we know to ask for updates of going on in their lives, and
So market fills your bucket.
yeah, it kinda fills your bucket.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, well,
cool.
because this is something that we talk about, is one of the questions that people ask after they've decided which crops they want to grow is, hopefully in the same session of thinking, they're also thinking about where they're going to sell it. Not,
Mhm.
I've grown this and then I have a
Now
truck
what do I
full of
do?
squash. Where do I take it? But anyway, so when people ask, and that's one of the things we talk about is, knowing your own reaction to that type of thing, because what you're describing, the idea of going and being at market for hours, and every Saturday or whatever day of the week, that's an intensive social process that for some people is a great fit and for other people is not. And so I think that
Right,
that's,
because sometimes people ask you, like, tough questions, like, out of the blue that you can't really answer, or it might be sometimes controversial, or I've known vendors over the years that we've sold with who they are not, like, people, like, they love growing, they
Yeah.
want to be at the market, but it is very,
Overwhelming.
challenging. It's
Yeah,
very
Not their
yeah, it's very
challenging.
forte.
overwhelming
It
to be
doesn't build
forced
them
in that
up.
situation,
Yeah.
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 That
so
tracks.
that's one kind of big personality consideration. Who else has one about themselves?
I was thinking about this. I had to think a lot about this, and based on our conversation last week and kind of who we are and what we felt when we were producing, I guess I could see some themes here. There was cattle and tobacco, and then we had like a truck, primarily a truck route. We did sell directly to individuals on vegetables. But I made the decision early on. I was really more interested in the vegetable production. I love the cattle and stuff too, but my personality lended itself to the fact that I thought on the vegetable side, I could control more variables. And that appealed to that part of my brain, that I could produce something, be efficient at it without it trying to tear down fences or try to kill me. A tomato has never tried to kill me. And I saw that portion on the farm. So I always gravitated towards more of the green bean, snap bean production and tomato production, watermelons, whatever. And we made decisions earlier on. I figured out that I liked a truck route, and we sold directly to places, supermarket chains. Back then it was a little bit different process, more straightforward. But rather than work with individuals, once the production was done, the part of my brain wanted to be efficient. I wanted the greatest bang for buck. So I
Mhm.
was not necessarily, even though I'm a bit of an extrovert, I was not in community builder mode. To talk to individuals about, that awesome white half runner bean or mountain greasy bean that we grew. Even though I enjoyed doing that, I was interested in selling 10 bushels at a time on a truck route that was established, or especially to a supermarket. I could sell a volume. So it was that part of my brain that I realized very early on that I love the efficiency portion of putting things in place and getting the most accomplished with my time input. So it's interesting. I'm an extrovert, but at the same time, I want a kind of a good return on my time with what I was doing. So I gravitated more towards selling quantity over selling to individuals. That's kind of how it translated back in the day.
What how would you describe your relationship to risk?
I was more averse to risk because it goes back to that factors that I can control.
Mm.
And I approach risk as I measured it against the return. So if somebody had wanted a bush blue lake bean or something like that, I would try that, but only a fraction of the field would go into that. And so
Mhm.
I managed risk very incrementally. Like I would not go all in on half a field of something that I didn't know was already a proven match to our farm operation. I wouldn't do that. Yeah, that's
So were
just
you were
me.
you under the impression, or you had the feeling that the market channels that you were going to sell to on those truck routes, or however, that they were pretty reliable, pretty steady, that they would buy?
Yes. Yes, and
Yeah.
that's what one of the things I appreciated those I could get some quantities in my mind up front before I went out and sold those things. In other words, there was sort of a commitment up front. I was just not relying on foot traffic at a market, even though that's very good. It's a different sort of thing. I could have a more of a known quantity that I knew was assured to be sold.
Yeah.
So that also was risk management in my brain. I didn't look at it at the time in my 17-year-old brain, 18-year-old brain, but that's kind of what I was doing when I reflected back on that.
How did that compare to the market and approach and outlook on tobacco?
Tobacco was a very consistent producer for us. And it was, a lot of people, the old saying is tobacco is what paid for the farm, because year in and year out
Mhm.
is a very consistent revenue stream. Whereas there used to be more so like a cattle cycle where the price would go up and oscillate and go back down in a fairly predictable, given amount of time cycle. Whereas tobacco, at least back then, that was, many years ago, keep in mind, that was many years ago, it was a very consistent high value crop, high input crop, but high value crop. And I also enjoyed tobacco because of that reliability of production.
I was gonna
And
say very
yeah,
reliable.
very reliable. And that, as far as managing risk, that part of my brain loved that. Yeah,
And so
it paid the bills. Yeah.
so you all at that point were selling to the co-op?
Yes, we at the time, you sold it more directly to the co-op. Yes, it was
Yeah.
not under any kind of contract. And even
Right.
that being the case, if you took and kind of reverse engineered the numbers back, let's say 30 years ago, inputs were low and the price of tobacco per pound was very high. So that was good. That was good times. That was good
Yeah.
times. I mean, there's always risk of black shank or blue mold, or, we had fields that would get that, and then we would have to move that into vegetables, which I enjoyed putting the puzzle pieces together and move tobacco somewhere else. But that was all just part of the puzzle, and I enjoyed that as well.
Yeah. This kind of oversimplification, but I think one of the things is I've tried to understand the role in the development of markets in Kentucky is that through that cooperative, the Burley Tobacco Cooperative, right? I'm not speaking out of turn here.
Hmm.
They worked to help keep higher prices for producers. That was
Yeah,
part of what they were trying to
yeah,
do.
keep the
Stabilize the market, keep prices
yeah,
higher.
and yeah, and it
And
did that for a long time. Yeah.
yeah, and the big capital M big market changed in big ways with the tobacco
Yeah.
settlement and the other major cultural shifts. But I think one of the things with vegetables, especially now, is that with tobacco, you kind of in that system you had relative stability in the market, and so you were mainly focused on fixing production issues.
Yes,
And
you tried to
and
control at least one side of the variable. Yeah.
and now the amount of complexity that happens on the marketing side with vegetables, it's just a
Yes,
completely, while there may be certain things that are similar in the sense that it's it's labor intensive to produce tomatoes, it's labor intensive to produce tobacco, but the market side is so radically different that I think
it
it's
is.
yeah, and that's why I asked about risk and
Well,
this
and
understanding of risk.
with the weather, there was risk in, like vegetables, because that's a totally different thing than a row crop like tobacco or soybeans or corn. Because there's a certain amount of immediacy that you have to get in there at breaker stage, or when tomatoes get to the stage that they're at a certain ripeness, and there's no leeway once they have to be harvested. If you're talking about a strawberry, even more so, or fruit, it has to be harvested when it has to be harvested, or you lose the crop. There's a little bit more forgiveness on those timelines with something like tobacco or corn and some of the other more agricultural based row crops. But that's where the risk came in with vegetables. My brain had to reconcile that. I was like, okay, we do have some tobacco if I really screw up these tomatoes, or if we run into a bunch of bad weather, or we get blight on the tomatoes. So we spread our risk that way. Everything to me, once again, I didn't conceptualize it this way, but everything was about managing risk and kind of spreading your income streams over three big areas on our particular
Do
farm.
you think that or is that trucking route, those customers, those relationships, that process, is that still possible today?
I think that it still exists. I mean, Jessica may be able to speak more to that, or maybe even Alexis. I mean, truck routes they worked at the time because people, it seems like they preserved a lot of food, so we could sell a pretty good quantity at a time. people would ask for a peck or a half a bushel, or they would ask for a bushel. That a pretty good quantity. It was no, we didn't sell anything by pound as far as snap beans go. We sold in larger quantities. It was almost everybody took at least a bushel, and that's why the truck route worked for us. And did fairly well. And we would go on local towns, and we knew our delivery routes, and the price of gas was cheap, and we kind of had factored all of that in. But is that still a thing, Jessica? I mean, do people do kind of truck drop type routes?
I don't know of any like that I think of off, the top of my head.
Really kind
when
of
I
went out of fashion a long time ago. It seems
yeah,
like, I don't know.
when I
Feels
think
like
about
CSA kind of like
yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
It
Yeah,
was like
Alexis.
yeah, really. It was kind of like an early
it
version of
was
a
almost like
CSA.
a bulk
Yes.
CSA.
Yep.
That's kind of what it was, and we maintained those relationships with people, and we enjoyed because we had the same customers, Mrs. Smith down the street, like for years and years, and they would call us up about the time they
Right.
needed to call us, and we would deliver. But yeah, I never looked at it as
I
like a CSA, but that's
I
kind of what it was. Yeah.
feel like that's what it's morphed into because I was thinking the exact same thing, Alexis, that
Mhm. It's an
don't
interesting
really
thought.
see that so much anymore. And I from a market standpoint, sometimes you have people who want to do bulk orders, but like you said, you don't want to take that risk and plant, a
Yeah.
ton of stuff and then they
Yeah.
don't come and get it later. But I feel like those truck routes have kind of developed to those CSAs or maybe that wholesale market when people want those larger quantities for like when they're going to can beans or they're going to freeze corn.
Yes.
They're going to
Yes.
go, if they don't have a direct farmer that they know where they can get that from, they can also, visit those wholesale ones. Cause I know a lot of people who do that in our area. Cause like I mentioned, we're close to one of those markets, those auctions. And I know when it's like sweet corn time or green bean time, people will go down there and try to get those large quantities for when they're canning and freezing
What about
corn.
box beef though? Now, truck routes, they kind of do, they kind of exist with like beef. That's a different thing as far as a
Mhm.
customer
Well,
kind of.
so can you help me understand this truck route thing? Because I actually this is completely I don't know exactly
Gotcha.
what you're. So is this that people are like you're kind of going around and you have 15 bushels of beans in the truck and you roll
Yeah.
and you stop by their place and say how much do you want, or have they already pre-ordered it, or
Both. Both. And people knew you'd be in a certain area in a certain parking lot on a certain day. But a lot of people we just knew to because they had called and requested a certain quantity. I
okay.
need 3 bushels. So it was a blend of both. Um, but that was one of those things I felt like I could manage like my customer, people interaction. It was kind of a middle ground between wholesale, say going to, a big box store, and we would sell 100 bushel of beans. Fairly straightforward back then. And the intermediate between the direct farmers market, which I don't remember doing a lot of farmers market stuff. It was a truck route or wholesale, which was less customer end user interaction than that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
when you can sort of make all your transactions as fast as you can get along the route.
yeah,
And then once
yeah,
you're
yeah,
done on the route, you're done on the route. You're
yeah,
not, because at the farmer's market, to some extent, you're sitting there waiting for people to come up and
yeah,
you have to
Right.
do, okay,
yeah. My father
interesting.
when he was on a farm, they had lots of predated me. They were on a farm. They grew a lot more fruit, and so they would go into like the Kentucky, West Virginia, a little bit of Ohio. Like they had a much larger truck route, but when they would take a truck somewheres way back in the olden days, it would be an entire truckload that they knew they already had sold into big markets, and they would do fruit that way.
Was it
Um,
a truckload or was it actually a carriage or a wagon? 'Cause
it a little bit of hybrid. There was no not as an electric hybrid, but yeah, good question, Alexis. Yeah, yeah.
What about
Ye
what
olden
about you,
days.
Alexis? Did you come up with your marketing relative to your personality type?
Yeah, I think I'm right in the middle, where personally, farmers market is overwhelming, and it feels inefficient for me, just because you don't necessarily know what it is, and it depends, and it depends on what you're selling. So if you're selling a flowers, or you're selling lettuce or something that not as many people are buying, if you're selling bok choy, you might not be getting as many sales for that. And so the risk of the market and just the amount of energy it took to be there and be turned on for people was too much for me. Now, I think if I farmed full time and I was like not around people, constantly and talking to people constantly, that might change. I might enjoy that experience more. But I like wholesale, but I think sort of that CSA route, or CSA idea is a nice in between, because there is some consistency as far as, in theory, you have all your people paid in advance, how much you're producing for. Now, granted, CSA has kind of gone a little bit different these days in the models that are out there, but still in theory, you kind of know how many people to expect. It's the same day every week. It's the same amount every week. And you know what you're making, on each item. And so I think that that's nice. You don't have to adjust the price or anything. It's already paid for. But you get to have a little bit more of a relationship with people. So you see their photos, or they tell you what they made with their thing this week, or that they gave your bouquet to a friend because they were, having a tough day or something. And so you still get to build a little bit more of a relationship. You see those people coming back to you, every season to get a CSA share. But you don't have to necessarily like have a 20-minute conversation with them while you're trying to like make sales to 10 other people in line. So
Yeah.
which I think is beautiful. So it's sort of, it can still be like a lot of like work on the computer, which can be a little bit tiring. And, you really have to decide if the money is worth the time that you put in with a CSA. I think a lot of people are coming to that realization that your time is valuable and you should be paying yourself for all that management time, that you're not outside growing. And so sometimes it's not as viable, but I like that. It's a good in between with the risk and the personal relationships.
And you mentioned something too, it probably plays into this conversation, and your comments, Alexis, is that you mentioned like an outside job. You already have like a job, and then you go home, you have another job.
I podcast.
Yeah, podcast is our job, but I mean, people's time availability, it definitely plays into this, and some of it's personality, and some of it may be situation. I mean, let's
Yeah.
not go nature nurture, but
Right. And if you
yeah.
work, a more normal 9 to 5 job, maybe you work where you don't get to talk to a lot of people. Maybe you're, doing a lot of computer work or something. So the farmer's market is a good outlet for you. Totally can see that and understand a lot of people who have success that way. But for me, I was just like, I cannot people any longer for this amount of money, not knowing how much. And then you have extroverts like Jessica and her husband who work with people every day for a living and still enjoy going to market. And bless you people.
It's probably a bad thing. We need to learn how to take breaks and self-care.
I heard of Jessica's comments, yes, they are people, but there's also motivation there. It sounds like because they are people, they do well. It's, there's a feedback on that, and there's, gain on that. So yeah. And you guys, are in bigger markets, I'm assuming. So that probably all plays into it. With people,
Right.
but it's just a different thing, isn't it? And it's not neither good nor bad. It's just a different. And really, Brett, that was a good thought when you had it's part of it's your personality. I know people that only want to be producers and they will not do anything. They don't want to do anything outside of that. They know what they like and they stick with it. I've learned to appreciate that.
Yeah, there's been a number of times where, like, so regularly I'll get a call or an agent or somebody to reach out and sort of say, we got these people, they're interested in doing this new thing. Can you come out and talk to them or get in contact with them, share whatever you're going to do. And generally speaking, when it's someone who is coming to this from like a retail background or a business management background or a sales background, and they're trying to figure out the plant stuff, I would put my money on them being more successful as business people than someone who's a perfect grower who is not engaged in the business side at all.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because
you
we can
can
teach you the plant stuff. Like
Yeah.
we have people who
I
are
worked with
specialists. It's a lot harder to learn how to post on
yeah.
Facebook
I would even go
regularly.
further as to say
Yes.
that your customers are not as good, will not be as good at telling the difference between a good product and a great product as they will telling the difference between okay customer service and great
Yeah.
customer service.
The
Yes.
largest producer I ever worked with said, he said, he was in the business of greenhouses and growing plants, said, I'm not a plant person. He's more of a process person and a business person. But he said, because the plants are an important part of the business, he said, I'm a secondary plant person, not a plant person. But yeah, just exactly what you said, Brad. Biggest producer I've ever worked with. And
A
it was
ton
very
of people
interesting.
come to this because they love plants.
Yeah.
And then they want to figure out a process that will allow them to play with more plants and pay the bills and
Hi.
cover the
Hello.
Have you
Hello,
met
Alexis.
Alexis?
but
Hi,
not, I
Alexis.
mean,
You
but
too, Jessica.
I know.
I would say not
Yeah.
not many of them are as as savvy or as committed to that side of it as you all are, but
Yeah.
you definitely have the flavor of plant person who's making the business stuff work. And I think that's great. I'm not at all saying that it can't work that way.
What?
But if you are so disinterested in the business side to try and be like, I just don't know why I'm not good at marketing, or I never put time toward marketing. It's just that every time I go to do it, I fill with sadness and
Anxiety and
malaise and
dread.
anxiety.
And you
That's
don't
probably
do
why,
it. Yeah.
because you hate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that
Hire someone. That's what
Yeah.
you tell them to do.
yeah.
Right.
We should all pay for what we're good at and be paid for what we're good at. It's okay to not be good at things.
How does all this discussion we're having, we're talking about like real, like face-to-face interactions, but how do we square all of this conversation with the online marketers and dealing with all of that? Is that something different? Does that hit a different part of your brain? I mean, so I know, Brett, you guys, some of you guys have dealt with this a lot with the online marketing. I mean, is that a different sort of thing than what we're talking about here and how that plays into your personality?
I think so.
I would
I
think
mean,
so.
yeah,
I
I've
mean,
always been curious about that.
I think
Yeah, I mean-
Alexis was talking about kind of playing in that space of there's a little bit of the direct sales, like you're standing there interacting, but there's a
Yes.
lot that's more like sending cool emails and
Support.
having your home store updated
Yeah.
and letting people know
Yeah.
through social media.
Mhm.
And
even
that-
I mean, even
yeah.
wholesale, you're doing like contacts with your buyer.
Yeah.
What do you have? And maybe they're not pretty and colorful, but sometimes they are. I mean, depends what you sell. You know, you've got to get them to buy, and with like the same, you know,
Urgency,
kind of urgency that you might
enthusiasm.
enthusiasm that you might have at a farmer's market in some ways. I mean, yeah, if they need lettuce, you've got lettuce, they know you have good lettuce, they don't need to see your lettuce until it shows up, right? But other things, if you've got a bumper crop of some, kohlrabi, and you're wanting to offload it, you kind of have to, talk it up a little bit. You got to make it salesy. But if you're doing more direct retail, you've got to have recipes that go with it, or you've got to say, look how easy it is to put flowers in a vase, or it's winter, don't you want something pretty in your life? Like, there's just so much more to it without even necessarily talking to a person. So it could be social media, emails, your website store. Jessica, how much time have you spent on your all's like Square, and even just inputting things so that you can sell them? Like, has nothing to do with, if someone could buy it online. It's just putting all of those items into your store so that when you're at market,
an inventory for point of sale.
Creating inventory.
Yeah.
Which, we didn't necessarily used to do, but now it's, people want to pay with a credit card. And so having your inventory in there makes a difference.
Want to pay digitally otherwise, right? Like
Venmo,
or Apple Pay, or those kind of things.
The amount of things when I go take my taxes in, and all of the W-9s that I have to like bring in because of all the methods of payment. I mean, that in itself is like a whole other thing you add to that if you're doing, retail sales, or even I've got wholesale accounts that will legitimately pay me with either PayPal or Venmo sometimes, like if they don't have a checkbook.
Suddenly the theme, I'm starting to lean towards the business side of plant loving, because you guys are adding all of this, all of these elements.
Well, it's like marketing, right? So versus if you're the kind of person who's like, I don't want to have a store, I don't want to, I don't want to do a lot of that other stuff, you might have a roadside stand. And so like that plays into, what is your market? How much time do you want to put in? And, maybe you just let your neighbors know and you're in a busy road. So people stop and they put cash in the box and they take their tomatoes. And so, that is also an outlet that has none of those extras, but it's not dependable. Right. And so, your risk is higher, but the inputs you put in are so much lower that it probably balances out, versus, going to a farmer's market and putting in all that inventory.
Right.
I think one of the things that people tend to think sometimes is that marketing is like this magic that they haven't figured out the incantation to yet.
No.
And it's really not. I mean, there are people, just like Alexis's thumb is multiple shades greener than mine. People who are natural, actually everybody on this podcast. God, why do I hang out with plant people? You're all
She's the guy who has beautiful bonsais outside. I was like,
yeah, but
you know a lot about plants.
But I learned a lot of that from you all. So there's people who are naturally or they have an inclination to be better or worse at certain things. But overall, the people who are really good at marketing and maybe have a knack for it also have put a ton of work into it. And you're continually working at it. You're continually pushing it.
The harder you work, the luckier you get. Yeah.
And I think with marketing, it's consistency.
Yeah.
Is a big thing. Like, sorry, Brad, I didn't mean to interrupt your thought there, but you don't necessarily have to know exactly how to do it, but if you keep showing up to do it, you'll get feedback. Like with social media, it's instant, right? Either people are liking it or commenting on it, and it's getting out and being seen by people, or it's not. Like you can get pretty immediate data back these days from that. And even your email list, like you send an email out, you can see how many people opened it in the first place and how many people are clicking the links, so that adding a picture and putting the link onto the picture made a difference. And so you can get this immediate feedback, but you have to be consistent about it. And so, I think that's the biggest thing.
What about that do you find the easiest and the hardest?
Based
on your personality.
Yeah, I would say the hardest is like sometimes during the year, if you're very, what you do is very seasonal. And so if it's winter, it can be like, well, what do I want to talk about? What do people want to hear? Like how much? And then, worried about being salesy. I've always worried about like, I don't want to feel like a used car salesman and always be posting about sales. But then when you think about, I heard a statistic and, don't quote me, but it was something around like only 10% of what you post is seen by a person at a time. And so even if you just posted about, your sale on freezer beef, on Monday, probably 90% of the people who maybe follow you on social media or even get your emails didn't see it on Monday. So you posting about it on that Friday or Saturday is not the repetitive, annoying thing that you think it is.
Your customers aren't seeing your content as much as you are.
Exactly. So your customer probably hasn't seen it. So like posting about that more. So kind of getting into that mindset was hard. The easiest thing is just sharing the journey. I think for me, it's just like people just want to know what you're doing. And so like once I got it in my brain that anything I shared, because what I do is so different than many of the population out there. Same with Jessica. Again, we surround ourselves with similar people. So it's easy for me to think that like, well, everybody knows I'm doing seeding right now because everybody I know is seeding stuff right now.
Right.
Yeah. No, most of my customers are not seeding, which is why they buy from me. Yeah. And so just once I like figured that out, it was like, oh, just share what you're doing right now. And then it became way easier.
That's Alexis and I have talked about this a lot over the years because same thing about like, do you put a sale on there? Do you advertise that or not? Or just like the keeping in mind, like we have baby calves that are being born right now. All of our cows are like, do have babies all right now. Like, well, I see baby calves all the time. And like my neighbors see baby calves all the time. But then like, do most of our customers see baby calves, right?
I drive by baby cows every time. And every day when I see the baby cows, I go, look at baby cow. Like, right? Show me your babies.
You're right about just like posting the journey, because I think we take for granted what we're around all the time, that we think it's not something, not that it's not special, right? But
it doesn't feel as special to us as it does to our customers. And when in doubt, post a picture of a corgi
Post it up.
because
I mean,
always
that
a good
instantly
one.
says cut flowers, corgis. And it's weird. We have folks in our I'm trying to think of the people that grow flowers in my county. Most of them have corgis. I don't know why that's a thing.
It's a thing. It
I don't know if
legitimately
it's
is
a
a thing.
package deal or they're just so close to the ground they can help you cut the flowers off at the ground level. I don't know, but I have a question for Brett and Alexis. Today we're talking about personality types and how that relates to production and markets and things. Um, you guys, in dealing with all spectrums of producers around the state, as on campus folks as specialists, is it ever hard to reconcile two personality types? And by this, I'll set up the scenario. You have one person that's there for the social aspect, and they happen to grow some things, and they are just there for the people, and they'll price it at whatever level. They don't care about input costs. So that is person A. Person B is there as a regular farmers market producer. They have weighed the risk and reward and done the analysis, and they are there. They've priced their product based on input cost and all of these other factors. I mean, is there any reconciliation at a market for these people that have such different objectives? One is wanting to do one thing and one is wanting to do another. I mean, is that a real thing, or did I just make up a unique scenario that has never existed?
No, Ray, that literally happens all the time.
I mean,
So I'm
yeah,
not. I mean, I'm serious. I know I
no.
said it kind of in a funny way, but yeah. So in some cases, person A, the person who doesn't really care, they're retired. They maybe have money
Right.
already. They are just doing this for fun to stay active, or perhaps they have a bunch of children and they're able to raise stuff without any labor costs. There's a lot of various examples of how that plays out. And in some cases, it's just a matter of not wanting to change. That farmers markets in particular, we have these price reports that we do. One of the ways that we encourage people to use these price reports is to have a market like that particular farm, County A's farmers market, to have a conversation internally in County A to say, look, this is kind of what these going prices are, and this is the conversation, or this is the math that we've done on how much we can sell stuff for, and we really are, having problems with the undercutting, which is the way that it's perceived.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's not a ton of great recourse to address that, other than talking through it and providing information and sharing. But it can be pretty frustrating, and it can be something where, as far as allowing people to come to the market, is vendors there might be discussion there about, but a lot of markets are trying to add more vendors all the time. And so the idea of turning someone away just because their prices are lower is a problem.
And I've never thought about that in terms of personality, but when you suggested the content for today, I guess it kind of, some of that may go back to personality, right? Like different objectives. And it's interesting when you suggested that. Never once thought about it in those terms, that the person that's losing money, that may not be their objective to begin with, and which may go back to their personality. So it's an
Totally.
interesting angle. That's a really interesting angle to me. And I know markets try to deal with that in different ways. It seems like setting price floors, or
Yeah.
there's probably different strategies, but it seems like there's a reconciliation that, has to be acknowledged at some point.
It definitely causes a ton of tension.
Yeah.
I would say undercutting and reselling are the two biggest hot button issues in a lot of farmers markets.
Confirm.
Yeah.
Well, like in the reselling, that may be the motivations. I'm just assuming that that's going to be different than the person's there for the social aspect. I mean, because a reselling scenario, which sometimes is acceptable and sometimes not, depending on the market, like reselling may be a way to mitigate risk, manage risk, because you just purchase a product and sell it for a higher price, and you count the difference. Is it worth your time? Whereas the social seller is just there for the community. So yeah, personality types. It's a very interesting filter to apply to this conversation. It really is.
Yes. And I mean, even from the market side, the reselling can have value and be harmful.
Yes, absolutely.
If you have a bunch of vendors who aren't going to have much of a robust offering until mid-June, and you want to capture that farmers market audience when they're thinking about food in May or April even, resellers can fill out your product line for a little while until the stuff comes in. And there's all kinds of, but ultimately for me, it's about agreement and transparency and all of those, like those, making sure we're setting the rules that we want to have, and we're following and making sure that people are following those rules is the main.
Yeah, if it's consistent across the board, and there's a certain amount of fairness, and like you said, that keyword transparency, this is the kind of market we are, and this is what we do. I mean, there's lots of different types of markets, no good or bad, no judgment in my comments there. It's just that are you being true to what you say you are doing? What you
transparency in your marketing, whatever style of market you enter, I think will go a long way, whether it's, wholesale buyers or retail buyers in any form or fashion. Just being transparent, again, tell your story, but also, if it's why you priced it some way, this is why my product's better, and you're being transparent about your pricing and things like that. And I think that goes a long way, no matter what personality type you are.
Listen, Alexis, if I'm here for the vibe of community, you just really threw some heavy stuff at me. I'm just here for the positive vibes, for the flowers.
And one thing I would just call back to that Alexis mentioned, and you kind of hinted at it, Ray, is part of the growth of your business hopefully will eventually involve hiring an employee of some sort, or bringing in some sort of secondary help. That could be that maybe if you're a couple or a family, maybe it's a family member or a spouse or something, but it could be somebody else. And I heard this, it's pretty straightforward, and anybody who's been around this world for a while, it's like this is a good piece of advice. But the recommendation was to hire people to do things that you hate or that you are bad at.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's not really a strategy if you're trying to get started, or you're not really in a place to hire someone or bring someone in. But though, for instance, for me, if farmers markets was just going to be part of my business because it fit with everything else that I was doing, then I would have a tendency, as soon as I possibly could, I would be hiring someone to physically go to the markets and handle customer service and sales as soon as possible, because that is not, I could limp through it, fake it till I make it. People who know me
immediately, yes.
People who have only interacted with me for like 1 to 2 hours would be like, oh no, this guy's this crazy extrovert, but they don't see the after that when I go somewhere and
crash
into the
your
nearest surface. So,
and we immediately hired someone to revamp and make all of our labels and all of that stuff for us, because for me, that was just like, I can't. It was too much.
And I know and this is another point. I know, Jessica, that you could do that because you're like, all of you guys on here are super talented, but so much of it goes back to personality. The more we have this conversation it's not about intelligence, it's about interest and what builds you up.
And interest in like, what is the best value for your time?
Yes.
Right? You're the business owner. You should be making more money than anybody you hire. So if I'm making $30 an hour, I should be doing work that's $30 an hour work, and I'll pay somebody else to do my $15 an hour work. So,
and they don't have to worry about some of the things. They get to kind of do their thing and go home.
Be done.
But I think that and if if you get into this and you realize that everything about the business side is just a total pain, and you're not making any headway, I don't know, that those are the most frustrating conversations, because it's kind of like, you hate this,
right?
You're putting a lot of energy into something that's making you really miserable, and like,
it's okay to have a hobby that isn't like a job.
Yes.
And that's hard for me to say as who I am as a person. So it's okay to have a hobby, or it's okay if you just like to be outside, you just like to grow things. Go work for someone else and be like, hey, I'll start all your seeds. There are so many people out there who would love to pay you to start seeds for them and to, go through and harvest Brussels sprouts, and, because they're going to handle the business side. And so you don't always have to be you are your own boss in the way of, you get to decide what you do, and that's great.
So, as Brett said, know thyself and know what you cannot do. A lot of times we can do a lot more than we're interested in. But it's and I guess everybody kind of does the weights and balances. That's a very personal thing, which we put the personal and personality, I guess.
Yeah. And if you really hate your job, like your not farm job, then maybe doing some of the things that you're not particularly interested in for your own business is preferable to how much you hate your job. So like, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go do all those things. Okay, that's great. But if, to sort of bring on misery just because you're trying to make money off of something that you're otherwise interested in, I have a hard time promoting that.
So we're giving you permission to follow your gut instincts here and, do the market that works for you, do the business style that works for you. And so if you needed that, sometimes we all just need that from a random stranger. We just need to be given permission.
0% chance that I could do what Jessica or Alexis do.
Yeah, no.
0%. Less than zero. What's less than zero? It's a like testament to endurance, to interest, to passion, to all those things, and so and I just know that about myself, and I'm good with that.
Know thyself.
No,
know thyself. Yeah,
we're bringing some culture. We're bringing our culture back to the Hort culture episode, and I think that's great. But throwing in some marketing thing there. So as you go through that and maybe want to try some new things, this is a good opportunity to just gauge yourself.
I'll plug a couple of CCD publications that are related to this.
Yes.
So there's one that we have that's called "What to Think About Before You Plant." And that one's just kind of an overview of basically thinking about marketing before you put plants in the ground, where you're going to sell, how you're going to sell it. And I think the things in there that are the most useful are on the last few pages. Well, there's middle, and then the last few pages, there's some charts, and they will compare farmers market to CSA to grocery to wholesale. And it'll tell you like how much product mix you need, how strict are the quality standards. Some of them are medium, some of them are high, some of them are how much volume is expected, that sort of thing. So that gives you a sense of what these market types are like. So as you're thinking about markets, that might be a place you want to go. And then the other place is there's a publication. It's relatively old now, but it's called the Primer, Primer, which is a kind of a personality test. I forget what it's like for evaluating a market channel or an enterprise. It's like profitability, risk, interest is one of the things actually to Ray's point. The PRIMER stands for something.
It's E is enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm.
What is M?
M is maybe market, and R is, I always forget what the R is. But it's really great because it's like an easy kind of worksheet for each letter, and it just asks you the right questions where to really help you gauge. I don't know. I feel like it's like an old school Cosmo quiz a little bit.
Yes,
or like those of you who read like magazines where there's quizzes in the back. It feels like that. It looks like it will be really boring. Okay.
Who's your ideal beau?
What's your ideal
ball, dark and handsome and rich is my answer.
Then farmer's market might be for you. But yeah, it kind of feels that way. It's easy to work through. So like, don't let the boring looking first couple pages influence you one way or the other.
But it's a kind of a way to get at some of this that we're talking about of like this is whether or not this is a good fit for you or not. And then the other one, it's not about market types, but the Hort Biz quiz we've talked about many times before, but it's another place to just go and get a sense of where you stand as you're making these decisions. But we'd always encourage you to reach out to your county agent, get in contact with them, make sure they know what you're thinking, and they'll have some thoughts, and then can direct you to one of us. And happy to support those decisions and just figuring out the right fit, because I'm seeing people go into markets and they have expectations that are very different from realities, or they're very different from what they thought things were going to be.
Right.
It's really hard. And so the more that we can do that on the front end and think through this and make sure it's what we want to do, the better off.
More successful you are, faster.
Yeah. And you might avoid a thing that's a real pain, and that means you're happier, and that's a win too. So.
Well, cool. Yeah. So we'll link those in the show notes. You can, of course, always contact us on social media, on Instagram at Horticulture Podcast. You can also shoot us an email. We all receive that email when you send it. So if you have any thoughts or questions or ideas for future episodes, if you want to be a guest, let us know. And we'd love to have you. But I believe that's all for now, folks. We hope you go out and enjoy some sunshine and drink some water, because after all, you are just a houseplant with feelings. And we hope that you will join us next time for another episode. See ya.